Hi, I'm Carmen Chammas. I'm your astrologer. Today I will talk about Sunday, the 5th of October. Today the moon is in Pisces, a water sign, for the second consecutive day, which makes it a nice day, very favorable day for Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. Also for Taurus and for Capricorns. Whereas Virgo may have a bit a restless day, probably, and it is a slow day, probably, for Aries, and a bit maybe moody or a little bit kind of grumpy, maybe, for Sagittarius and for Geminis. So, how's it going to be for all signs? Let's go into details.